a lot of people's experience of aphasia is that nobody knows what it is, and it's a hidden disability. Not being recognised as having something seriously wrong with you is incredibly frustrating.
Hi, and welcome everybody, and we hope you enjoy this podcast called On the Tip of My Tongue. Now, I'm Rob Edwards.
And I'm Jonathan Hirons.
And this podcast is a follow-up to a film which Jonathan made about aphasia. So, what is aphasia? Well, it's a condition caused by some kind of injury to the brain, which is often, could be a stroke, or could be just falling off a bike. And it affects your ability to use language in all its forms. Speaking, writing, reading, sending text, whatever. 350,000 people in the UK suffer from a debilitating condition called aphasia. Fewer than half this number suffer from Parkinson's, and yet most people have heard of Parkinson's, whilst almost nobody has heard of aphasia.
I'm Barbara Chalk. I'm a retired speech and language therapist. I've worked with adults with neurological difficulties with language and speech all of my working career. I'm now a trustee of Say Aphasia, which is a charity that supports people with aphasia.
So, hi Barbara, and welcome to this On the Tip of My Tongue podcast. Thank you so much for giving of your time and joining us.
It's great to be here.
Well, I hope you're saying that.
We'll see.
At the end. We'll see. You know, reserve judgment. Anyway, I thought before we get into talking about, all the wonderful work you do with people and continue to do with people with aphasia, I wondered if we might start by just a bit of speculation, but why it is that so few people seem to know about aphasia. Why is it so kind of under the radar? Is this an insightful way to kind of talk about aphasia? Is there something inherent in the condition itself, being something to do with the voice rather than the body?
I think that's really, really useful. And I think it underpins a lot of people's experience of aphasia, that nobody knows what it is. And it's a hidden disability. And not being recognised as having something seriously wrong with you, as it were, is incredibly frustrating. People label you with kind of, you must have dementia or some cognitive things, or he's a bit doolally, or he's a bit confused, or he doesn't know what he's doing. It's all nonsense, because it isn't that at all. I think there's loads of things that make aphasia difficult. The one thing is the name of it. I mean, it's a Greek word. For goodness sake, that is the most difficult word to say, probably. If you have, if you don't have aphasia, lots of people say it wrong, and it's not a memorable word. So the name of it is the first start. 2 is you can't see it, so that's really difficult. And I think the other thing is it's just about language. Now, that's really weird for the public to understand. It's like, can you imagine not being able to find your words, but you know what's going on? I think that's really difficult to put across to the public, because they kind of, and also, so that's one thing. But the other, I mean, there's so many challenges. It's a really, really good question to start on. The other one is everyone I've ever met with aphasia is different. Everyone you meet with Parkinson's is kind of similar. They have the kind of flat face, the stooped walk, the slurred speech. Easy. They're nearly always the same. And they go from being without Parkinson's, and they progressively get worse. And you can see the pattern, and it's really kind of understandable. Now, people with aphasia are so different, because they can all have brain damage to a different degree. So some people, and also they can have the damage in different areas of their language centre. So some people can understand words really well, but they can't say them very well. Or some people can write and not talk. Or some people can talk really well, but their writing and their reading is really bad. And on top of all that is they're all different personalities. That kind of how you cope with it and how you handle it is difficult. do you know that's the beginning of the pot of things that are difficult to kind of, you know, for the public to understand it. So how you describe that to the man on the street, God, it's hard.
I was just thinking what you said there about confusing it with Alzheimer's or dementia or something, as when you meet someone with aphasia and they can't get their words out properly. Can we talk a little bit about that? There is a kind of huge, as I understand as a layperson, there's a huge difference, isn't there? You know, aphasia is not dementia or Alzheimer's. No. You're not losing your marbles. If you want to talk in computer terms, your main drive is intact. You've got your memories, you've got your thought, everything's going on. It's just a bit of software in the brain that isn't getting it out in various ways.
No, that's a good analogy. So that you literally can't find the words. It's not that you can't find the sense of what you're doing. So you know where you are, you know where you want to go. You just can't find the name of the street or how, you know, the directions. You couldn't describe the directions, but you know exactly where you're going. And you don't have your memory is not affected. Your ability to cope with daily life isn't affected. I mean, I'm talking, obviously some people do have additional problems because they may have bits of their brain when the brain damage happened that might have touched the memory bit or whatever. But generally, as a kind of pure aphasia, is about words, reading, writing, speaking, and understanding. And of course, if somebody can't understand words, you kind of think, oh, they're stupid. But no, they just can't understand words. It's like, I don't know what it's like. It must be like going to Russia if you can't speak Russian. You know what's going on. You know what you want to eat. You know what you want to drink. You know who everyone is around you and what's going on. It's just you can't understand anything that anyone's saying to you, and you can't ask for the drink or the food you want or the directions or anything. And you've completely not lost your marbles. You've just lost your ability to use words to function, really, to get on with your life. Yeah. So, and I think that's incredibly difficult for the layperson to understand and for us to describe it.
That is very illuminating, isn't it? Perhaps we should talk a bit about your work. So say someone is just in hospital now, coming round after a stroke, and they are discovering that they have some form of aphasia, which could be any number of different symptoms about difficulties with language, as you say. Yeah. What would you say to them if you could talk to them?
I think you have to recognise that I can't imagine what it's like, and John will know what it's like to wake up and you kind of know what's going on around you, but you're like, what the heck has happened here? Yeah. So there's a massive shock about you can't read words or anything. It's just, so I think the first thing is to treat that gently and recognize that that's a massive shock, and not to throw loads of information to people, which is like completely bewildering because they've kind of woken up suddenly in a different world, as it were. Yeah. It must feel like that. I don't know, but it must be something. I don't know. John will be able to say that better than me. So I think the job of a therapist or anyone that's working with someone with aphasia is help them to understand what's gone on and what their difficulties are, and that can take time, and then how to kind of manage it and how to heal some of it, how to kind of get better at some of those things. But it's about understanding what's going on, and also for the family as well. Because, I mean, so many people come to our drop-in groups and they've had a stroke, let's say, and they've had aphasia for, I don't know, a couple of months maybe, and they're still kind of going, I don't really understand it. It can take a long time to work out what affects your function. If you're tired, if you're overstimulated, if there's a lot of noise going on, if there's a lot of people talking, that all makes it much more difficult. So you've got to kind of learn to manage that and kind of get used to that. And the family need to learn to do that as well. And the family need to learn how to manage how they communicate, maybe slow down a little bit or write something down, or maybe draw some pictures for complicated things they might want to put across to them, or, all sorts of different ways that the family will have to adapt. Because, of course, we're talking about communication, really, and that involves two people. You can't kind of have aphasia on your own in a way because you're going to
Yeah.
talk to your wife or your husband and they're going to have to go, well, I don't get what you're saying. So it's kind of like there's adaptation all around. So I think
Yeah.
whoever's working with the person needs to kind of, work with that as well. And how because the best way to manage it is understand it and then kind of adapt your environment a little bit to help you be successful at communicating. Make sure people slow down, they don't go too fast, they maybe turn the radio off if you really need to concentrate on telling, all that sort of stuff. And that's kind of what our drop-in groups hopefully offer, is a place where that's understood. Because if you go to the pub, nobody really gets it, and you're sitting there kind of, oh my God, there's too much talking going on. I can't focus on what you're saying. There's there's chatter and everyone's talking so fast and they're changing the topic of the conversation. You go, well, I want to say something about that, and they've moved on to something else, and you're like, oh God, and in the end you just give up. It's just too exhausting and frustrating.
Yeah. I can't imagine it. I can imagine getting Parkinson's in a way.
Yes.
Or having something physical, ending up in a wheelchair. I mean, horrible as that would be. But it could sort of come to terms with that. We are our voices much more than we are our bodies. And in a way, we live our lives separate from our body. We're in our bodies, but we're not. But
you're right.
We are our voices in some way. It's our personality. It's the way. It's who we are somehow.
Exactly. And I think that's a massive, massive feature of it. Imagine if you're the life and soul of the party, you're the comedian, and that's all about timing, isn't it? And that's like getting your word in quick. Well, I am the funny man. Suddenly you're not the funny man.
You're not.
And, so I think it goes really deep, aphasia, to kind of your self-esteem and who you are. I think that, that would account for, you'd have to get your head around that, as well as getting your head around, gosh, I can't quite manage my words in the same way. It's like who you are. Suddenly you're not the funny man. You can't do that. And you're not the one who organizes all the paperwork in the relationship. And that's all your roles are redefined. You're not kind of the decision maker about things in the same way. So it's really, that's the deeper part of what it is. You're absolutely right. The self-esteem, and not many people kind of think about that when you read about it. It's it's a language disorder, blah, blah. But actually, it's a really deep thing. It's kind of part of who you are, your self-esteem, and that's why it's associated with kind of a lot of low mood, which is understandable.
Absolutely.
So it is, and I think that's why people with aphasia especially need that longer term support that Say Aphasia offers. Because yes, you can have your rehab and you can work on your language, which is really important, and to work out what you can and can't do and how to manage it. But then you're stuck going, all right, I've got to live with my rest of my life. It will get better because it will. But, I can't get back to work because I can't manage emails and telephone conversations. That they're too complicated for me. I can't rely on my words to do my job efficiently. So therefore you then have to live with it and kind of work on your self-esteem stuff and all that. So you've got to be able to, it's a longer term project that needs support and inspiration and help with. You've got to work quite hard at it.
So tell us about your own experience of working with people with aphasia. So did you work professionally?
I was in the NHS and I worked most therapists work with neurological problems. So I also work with multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, all those things. But a lot of my caseload were stroke patients or other people who'd had a brain injury affecting their aphasia. And it's always been of massive interest to me because of the things we've talked about, because it's kind of your change of who you are, bigger than, your hand not working. So I've always kind of been interested in that long-term support for people.
So you work, the NHS. I mean, how is it a kind of poor relation in the NHS? Do you know about the funding side of things? How did you? I know John has told me from his own experience that he had to wait 6 weeks before he got somebody like you. I mean, got a professional speech and language therapist. And that's not a good thing, is it? You need to get cracking from day one.
I'm sad to hear that John experienced that, because the NHS does work really hard. Especially if you have a stroke, you're on a pathway. So you're supposed to get, speech and language, physio, OT assessments within a certain time, and they work really hard. But I think we all know the NHS is groaning, isn't it? So and some areas have not such good speech and language therapy as others.
It's a bit sort of postcode lottery.
Yeah, but I think, that's disappointing to hear that was a 6-week wait, because that must have been horrific.
I think that's right, wasn't it, John? That's what you said, I think.
Yes, it was 6 weeks. Well, and because there were so many slots, basically, you have to wait for somebody to stop their.
Yeah.
Well, they're 6 weeks or whatever it is, so you can start your 6 weeks. I did have another 6 weeks later on. I asked for one, but even that took a couple of months, I think, before it came through. So, I mean, people, obviously, the people at the NHS, staff are brilliant. Once you get, they're fantastic. And I had I've had 3 different people working with me on this, and they're all brilliant. So it's a money thing.
I heard, just talking about getting started early with therapy, that's helpful. I heard that as a condition, and this may be true of all sort of neurological, that you can make, because of the plasticity or whatever it is of the brain, it can adapt. If you get working on it early, you can build new pathways in there. But then it plateaus out. You reach a sort of thing. And then I read something that's what I thought was received wisdom for a while. So you can't expect it to go on improving. But then I did read that that's maybe not true. The latest research seems to be you might have to increase the amount of therapy and kind of go at it harder, but you can improve all the time.
I would argue you can get better over time, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think, as I said, the first few weeks, to be honest, you're kind of in such a haze. I often ask people with aphasia, because we sometimes look at, that first bit of their experience, what they remember, and they don't remember anything because it's such a blur. Right. They just remember, I used to say coffee for every drink that I had, and I didn't really like coffee, that sort of experience. But in terms of, yes, you have the therapy, which is the formal. What the therapy gives you, hopefully, is your assessment of what your abilities are, and I think that's really helpful. So you will get an idea of what you can and you can't do, because finding that out on your own is quite tricky. So it's really helpful for someone to guide you through that, and then you will have, depending on what is found, maybe some practice work and all that sort of stuff. But I would argue that then once that's finished, the real work starts, which is learning to live with aphasia.
Right.
And that's when you can implement all that stuff in a natural environment, because so that you have to be able to ask for a coffee when you want a coffee, and how to go around doing that. And just by exposure to communication in the right sort of way, you'll constantly improve, because your confidence will improve, your self-esteem will improve, and that will improve how much you communicate with people. So how successful you are at living with aphasia probably depends on how you can adapt to it and get on with your life, and find things that you can do, not things you can't do, because that's, I think, the other thing. You can keep bashing your head against the brick wall and say, I can't say 10 countries. I can't say 10 countries beginning with A or something. But, you could kind of go on with that sort of, let's do some naming things. But actually, in real life, is that actually useful? It's much more useful if you go out and kind of can order your breakfast or whatever. So, and that's kind of the real life work, really, that needs.
Barbara, tell us about
Yeah.
What is it? It's an organisation. It's a number.
It's an organisation. The joy of it is it's run by people with aphasia. Now,
Right.
if you know, a lot of people with aphasia are quite young, working age, and if they can't go back to work, they're kind of all their peers, all their friends will be working, and they're sit at home going, "Oh God, you know, I feel so hopeless. I can't do anything." So it's really good that it's run by people with aphasia. So at last, you could do something useful. You can be purposeful, and it is basically a group. It's a place where people with aphasia can meet other people who are experiencing the same thing. And that is a massive relief for a lot. The number of times people walk through the door, even when they've lived with it for quite a while, and go, I thought I was the only one, or I feel like the only one.
Really?
Yeah. And that, and then suddenly they go, oh, they get it. And everyone's different in the group because some can talk well, some can't. But they get it. They get the frustrations and the kind of lack, all those things we've been talking about. And I think that's incredibly important for some people to have that sort of support.
Where is it?
Well, we meet in Exeter in a hall, but all the other groups meet in different places, and they meet kind of each group is different because it's run by somebody with aphasia, and depending on what they can offer. So it could be every week, every month, every 2 weeks.
So it's not you. It's not you.
Not me. I'm just a trustee. Don't big me up too much. I'm just a trustee. But I did start charity in Exeter, and we just had one drop-in group, one group.
Right.
But I've merged with Say Aphasia. So my group is now a Say Aphasia group.
Right.
And there are 15 other groups that are running on.
Is it all charity funded? Is it all you raise money?
Yeah, it's all charity funded. Yeah, so it's not my group anymore. It's Say Aphasia. I'm not in charge.
Okay.
It's run by an excellent lady who has aphasia, and she runs it brilliantly. And I just kind of can't keep away, so I just go in and make a cup of tea and chat to people.
They're not going to fire you anytime soon.
They're not going to fire me, maybe.
No, we hope not.
So
I
kind of help to, I, as a trustee, just help to guide the charity so that it keeps offering this for people. But it's all run by donations, which are difficult because people don't get it. So you kind of have to work quite hard to explain what you do to any funder. Whereas if you say, oh yeah, we've got broken legs, can you help us? Everyone goes, oh yeah, I get that. It would be difficult. Oh, easy money, yeah. But when you try and explain, oh, we can't read or write, and everyone's different, and some can talk, it just becomes a long speech to try and understand it. And then they go, oh no, I'll just support the broken leg syndrome, It's easier.
Which brings us back, I think, to the funding of something like Parkinson's. That's that very thing, isn't it? Because people can get Parkinson's, understand Parkinson's. Therefore, money can flow through them.
Does the NHS fund Parkinson's much more than aphasia treatment? Do we know that?
I'd probably argue not. And there is a Parkinson's Society that offers the long-term support that we do. So I guess, I think every illness or condition probably, has some charity that's at the end of that journey for that patient, where they get them, help them to live the rest of their lives with that condition and support them.
Is there anything you'd like to say that you haven't said so far, if you can just think of anything?
I would just like to say that everyone I've ever met with aphasia has, even though they might feel a bit challenged, they've got an amazing sense of humour. And I do think that's because they're so frigging frustrated that you have to laugh. You have to laugh because who could make it up, So there is a great sense of, and I think when you bring people with aphasia together, they really appreciate that frustration, which is underlying for everyone. That frustration, it probably never goes away. But on the flip side, I will also say, I don't want to make it sound trivial, because on the flip side, we've got a lady who said the other day she got on the bus and she kind of, you couldn't say where she wanted to go. And that was so devastating for her, the reaction of the bus driver, that she didn't actually go on the bus again. And so,
oh, really?
This can and in fact, she said that she'd had her stroke 12 months or something, and coming to the group was the first time she got out. So then that's how powerful meeting other people with aphasia is. And that's how powerful somebody who's a member of the public who responds badly to your fumbling around with words can really knock you for six.
Is there any way? Yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah. So
Sorry, Bob.
I mean, for that lady, we have got a little card, and that can help sometimes. So you kind of, and now when she goes on the bus, if she meets somebody who looks like they're going to be, not really understanding, she'll just show it. It says, "I have aphasia. Please take more time." So therefore, you put in the responsibility on the member of public to to support you and to give you a break and give you more time. But it's very hard to do that because you have to admit that you've got something wrong, and then they're going to go, oh, but that, and that's what we were saying at the beginning. It really impacts a big part of your life and who you are and your confidence and things. Say Aphasia's got about 15 groups across the country, and we also have an online group as well for those that can't get out. Really, really invaluable for people who want to meet others and to get some support and get some inspiration on how to live with aphasia.
Quickly coming back to your lady on the bus with a card, is there any kind of app or something you can put on your phone? I realise you can't necessarily punch in what you want to say into it because you can't necessarily read or write efficiently. But if it was pictures or if it was certain everyday situations where you could kind of...
I've kind of tried to introduce that to people a lot of time in my work. I think the crux is that people with aphasia you just want to have a conversation. Now, conversations usually go off a tangent, don't they? And you don't have a picture to describe what you might be talking about. Laborious, and it breaks up the conversation. So I think it's better to have a pen and paper to hand. We had one guy who came and he used to have a little black note, and because he needed things written down to make fully sense of them, or he could write things down rather than say them. And he always said, people think I'm a policeman. Because of course it's like a little notebook, isn't it? So he had a great sense of humor, and he was okay with it because he'd had aphasia for a long time. But that was what he did. He just kept his notebook in, and that was really helpful for him. But of course, some people can't spell very well. So, but I think having a pen and paper is useful, not necessarily for the person with aphasia, but for the person who's talking to them.
Well, I used to rehearse going into shops. So I want to go. There's a shop round the corner where I buy bits and pieces, and I had to rehearse what I was going to say to them, because if I tried to do it off the cuff, as it were, I'd get into a right mess. So I had to remember. I had to walking up the street, remember I'm going to say this to them, and they're going to say that. Hopefully they did. Sometimes they didn't. It's a bit like another language, isn't it? Your French is your French is pretty good until they talk back to you, and you think, oh, bloody
exactly.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yes,
don't know anything you're talking about.
Even that strategy was a really good one for you, Jonathan. But for some people, they wouldn't be able to remember the word. They might be able to practice it at home, and then they get out and about, and you can't kind of. And if you're under pressure, we all can't forget things when we're under pressure.
Pressure is the thing, and in fact, just finishing that story is that I walk into the shop, and I go to pieces, because the pressure's on to get it right. And it's quite.
So that's why a little card to flash to someone means that they have to take the responsibility for the conversation. And that's quite important.
Quite
because,
good.
Yeah, because, for you with aphasia, it's quite difficult to take responsibility because, you're always on the back foot. You can't, you're not quick with words. So it gives them the control a little bit, and they can ask the questions and be.
Also, you never know which word is going to trip you up. So you say, today I'm fine talking about one thing, but the next day I won't be, because that word disappears. So it's a moving target, as it were.
It is, and it's not. I think some people might think, oh, well, you could learn it like a child learns language. Once you've learnt that word, you'll remember it. But that doesn't work
like
for
that.
Aphasia. It
No,
kind
it
of
doesn't.
pops in and out of your head.
Yeah.
So that's sort of, oh yes, just teach him these words, and he'll. That's not how it works, and that's another reason why it's difficult for the public to understand, because we would understand it if you could just learn it, but it doesn't work like that. It's fluid, and that's another thing that people go, what?
Yeah.
Is there a lot of research being done?
There's been a lot of research in the last, recently on supporting someone with aphasia, and how the best way to use supported conversation, i.e., all the top tips that help people with aphasia, and do we teach them that, or do we teach them this or that? Don't worry, it's fully researched. It's just the brain is very complicated. And the research is getting broader, as I say, not just focusing on language, because that doesn't really answer all those things we've talked about, your self-esteem, the fact that you have to communicate with someone else, so your environment's really important. So, it's quite a big area really to research, but there's lots going on.
Barbara, thank you so much for being with us and talking to us. You talk so eloquently and well about this whole subject. You obviously understand it so incredibly well that it's very, very illuminating. Particularly for me, I've known John, since we were 11, and I talked to him a lot about aphasia, but I didn't know the half of it, shall we say. I feel very much enlightened by what you've said. And you're very inspiring to talk to. It's great. Thank you so much. And maybe if we could have you back.
That would be lovely. Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to this On the Tip of My Tongue podcast. We hope you found it helpful and informative. Now, if you want more help and information about strokes and aphasia, please go to stroke.org.uk, Say Aphasia, that's SAY, aphasia, all one word, .org, or the aphasia page of nhs.uk. Okay, Jonathan, well, that was a lot of fun. So we're going to do it all again. What are we going to talk about next time?
Next week, I think we should talk about carers or caring. And one of the people we're going to talk to is Michael Shan.
Now, I think I know who he is. He's the head of Carer Support, Carers UK. Very important gentleman. His organisation has been making life better for carers. All carers, not just people looking after people with aphasia, but everything else, I guess. So that should be very illuminating. Anybody else? Have you got someone else up your sleeve?
I do. I have Anne Hirons.
That name rings a bell. Hirons, did you say? So who is Anne Hirons?
Anne Hirons is my wife, and she looked after me when I had my stroke. So we'll talk to Anne, who helped me out through my stroke and my problem with aphasia. Talk to her about from the caring point of view.
This has been a Buffalo Lounge production. Please follow Buffalo Lounge on all the socials.